Once again, I am joined with a man who has such an incredible amount of experience. He shared in our last episode of the Future Forecast podcast his spiritual journey as he made his way through understanding our greater reality and his own place in it. Sean Mahoney, the new host of the Future Forecasting Debrief. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Dennis. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have part two of our conversation. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit more about remote viewing. I thought we'd get to that in the last podcast, but you had such a neat story about your children seeing ghosts and kind of exploring that perspective. And I want to get into how that you landed up with remote viewing, which led you to the future forecasting group. So you mentioned it briefly that you had this interest and you went out and you learned it. But can you start us off there and talking about really what that journey was like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually saw The Men Who Stare at Goats, and
Oh,
I
it's a
was
great
already
movie.
having these these experiences, and I started going to that meetup group that I was telling you about, where the
Yeah,
the psychic and the spiritual and the paranormal stuff were being discussed.
right.
And in the beginning of that movie, there's a tagline that it starts with, and it says, "More of this is true than you would believe." And
Yeah,
that hit me like a freight train. When I saw
yeah.
that and then I watched the movie, I thought, I have got to learn more about this remote viewing. I
Hmm.
think I went to the library the next day and I got Joe McMoneagle's book, Remote Viewing Secrets, and I read it
Yeah.
cover to cover. And um, I was a little disappointed. I was glued to the book, but I was a little disappointed it didn't teach me how to do it. And
Right,
so I was like,
right.
I need to learn how to do this. And I think it was maybe a week later that I was at the bookstore. Um, And if you've ever had a book jump off the shelf at you, I had
Oh,
one of those experiences
many
where
times. Yes.
it's like somebody grabbed my eyes and pulled me up here to
Hmm.
the corner where David Morehouse's book, that it's kind of like an instruction manual
Uh-huh.
on CRV. And so I bought that book, read it cover to cover twice, and I
Yeah.
tried my first session. And I still remember that my target was it was a mosque somewhere in the Middle East with a really unique construction. It was kind of like an Adobe, um, like mud brick type construction,
Right.
and it had these wood beams sticking out of it that they weren't spikes, but they kind of looked like spikes the way they were
Right.
sticking out of the structure. And in the session, I drew like a railroad tie, and I was like, it's just a long piece of wood. And I
Right.
remember feeling like I was in a cave, like this really earthy, like being in the earth type of a feeling. And like that
Right.
would be like being in an Adobe building. And so I had all these little, I mean, I didn't have an amazing session of like, oh my God, I drew the mosque exactly, but I saw all
Right.
these elements in the session that registered with the target. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh my God, this is real. And
Yeah.
so I did use, after learning from a book, um, you have questions, but
Of course.
there's no instructor to ask the questions to.
Hmm.
And it was uh, just doing research online is when I found Teresa Frisch, who lived in Troy, Ohio, which is not that far north of Dayton. So I had an instructor that was in my area, and I reached out to her, and my wife and another friend from work took the training class with me.
Hmm.
And she came to our house and did the teaching. And I already had some uh, David Morehouse. Like I basically learned the basics. And Lynn Buchanan's methodology is slightly different. You use a different ideogram technique, and
Hmm.
the way that it's just nuances. It was mostly the same.
Right.
But I developed more after having the in-person training because I had somebody I could talk to and ask questions to, and got into IRVA. Because you get an IRVA trial
Hmm.
membership when
Right.
you're a student. So for those of you
Yeah.
who have taken training, you can go and get a free 1 year membership at IRVA. And
Yeah.
yeah, got I think the first conference I went to was in 2015, and that was down in um, New Orleans. And
Okay.
I think I met Glenn at that conference for the first time, and I was really just fascinated with the HRVG methodology. I
Right.
really wanted to learn as much as I could. And so, because I learned the Morehouse CRV, I learned the Buchanan CRV,
Hmm.
but this HRVG methodology was really different. But I had seen the videos with Dick
Yeah.
doing, work for Farsight,
Yeah.
and the little Nemo icon just fascinated me. Like, what is he doing with that? Like, how is he so good?
Yeah.
So I think it was 2016 that I got training through HRVG with CETA,
Hmm.
and so I kind of rounded out my RV experience by learning uh, that methodology as well. And then in 2017, I had been active on. I'll back up a little bit. I think it was like 2015 timeframe. I was active on the Facebook group,
Hmm.
and I met Gail Husick, who runs the Husick group, and
Hmm.
her Erva presentations are some of my favorites. Um, And so I started working with her as well and got involved in some of her operational projects that she does for clients. And it felt good to use remote viewing to
Hmm.
help people. I mean, it's cool to
Yeah.
do a practice target. It's cool to get the
Right.
hits and see like, wow, I bilocated. I had this experience and like,
Yeah.
but when your product that you produce goes to a client that's trying to solve a problem and
Right.
you help them, like, man, it's just such a good feeling.
Yeah.
And
That's a neat
so
feeling.
yeah, that was really rewarding to me. And so I really just enjoy it. To this day, I still, work with Gail and we're good
Hmm.
friends. In 2017, John Cook had reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have a vacancy on the board of IRBA. Would you be interested in joining our board of directors?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, man, this is awesome."
Wow. Yeah.
So I did IRBA for I want to say 3 years. I was on the board of directors there, and it was just I had to pinch myself to say, "Am I dreaming?" I was with Glenn, I was with Dale Graff,
Yeah.
and just Pam Coronado, like all these great folks, and getting to go to the conferences and be a part of that planning and put out the Work Collier.
Hmm.
Back then it was the Work Collier, now it's called something different, but um, it was just such a rewarding journey, and getting to work with the community and just see all the different projects people were working on.
It's a great community in general. I think just the remote viewing community and the way people who we look at as like looking at Dick and Daz and Edward as on YouTube and watching what they're doing, and you get to know them and you get to know other people in the community. It's like, wow, everybody's just so supportive
Yeah,
and willing to share their experience and encouraging as you're going through that process. It's a really supportive community, which I like about it. We have our infighting over this style versus that style, which is I always just kick back and watch as people are arguing over that. But it's really a great community to be a part of. I remember when I was pulled in just on the Facebook group, I was like, why are you inviting me into this? I'm just some guy in my basement who does a podcast, and they brought me in and just connecting with people and learning. That's awesome.
yeah, no, for sure. It is a great group, and you're right. The infighting does get tedious, but at the same time, it's entertaining. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's funny because when I was going to that spiritual meetup group, sometimes I would hear people in violent agreement. And what do I mean by that? Like there was a guy who practiced very shamanistic ways of practice for his
Hmm.
spirituality, and another guy was more um, gosh, I don't know, he was more like about guardian angels, but whether
Yeah.
you call it a spirit guide or a guardian angel, like, are you guys, to them, they're talking about different things, but
Right.
in a way, it's like you're kind of saying potato, aren't you? I mean, if you
Yeah.
relate to spirit in that way, like so when we get into the arguments about um, which way of doing an ideogram is the right way, it's like if if that allows the viewer to connect with the target and get good data, does it really matter?
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to say which is the right way or what's not the right way, but I know
Right.
that
What
I've
works for
learned
you?
lots of different methodologies, and certain ways work better for me. I get better data, I get better site contact when I use this other way. So for me, that works, but I'm not going to prescribe my way to somebody else that has a better experience using a different method. So
Right.
yeah,
Edward told me in one of my conversations with him, I think it's in a podcast somewhere. I'm not going to get it perfect, but it's always stuck with me. He says, first you learn how to remote view, and then you learn how you remote view. So I'm still learning how to remote view. So I can't wait to get to the stage where I learn how I remote view. But that really resonated with me because I've watched even over the past few years, everyone that we work with, we watch their styles continue to evolve and how they collect data and their methods because you're constantly growing. So I think that's fascinating and taking, like you went through all these different methods that you've learned. I mean, that's got to enhance, and if it's intuitively led, I'm sure somebody's like, well, this process might work for this portion of this target, or I might do this type. Like I've worked with guys with Hellfire, with Daz and everybody, and they'll do one session at CRV, the next session's HRVG, then they might do an ARV target, as they're working through just trying to gather data. And I think it really just enhances the overall product of it.
Yeah, for sure. And Edward is very wise.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
he's a lot of fun to talk to. I really enjoy my conversations with him and hearing his experiences. And you know what it is too? It's just his way of presenting it too. He just has a mystery in the way that he speaks. So it's always a fun conversation with him. He
Yeah,
always
I
leaves everybody
agree.
wanting more. Yeah. All right. So you ended up on the board of directors for IRVA, and then from there, how'd you make your way to future forecasting?
Yeah, so I became good friends with Glenn. Um,
Hmm.
when I did my training with HRBG, and we had some things in common, and got to work with each other a bit, and I joined the guild as a member,
Hmm.
and so getting to work with him on projects and stuff like that, we stayed in touch, and we're in this in this technology age, people text or instant message
Yeah.
on social media. He's not on social media,
Right.
but he's a pick up the phone and call you kind of guy. So, every now and again the phone will ring and it's Glenn and he's like, "Hey,
Right.
Sean, how's it going?" We'll talk. And but I just really appreciate that about him because
Yeah.
I'm not the best at staying in touch sometimes. So,
Same.
but
Yeah.
he called me a while back and he was looking because crypto viewing at the time
Hmm.
was starting up their uh, CETA's training to
Right.
get a pipeline of viewers trained in HRVG methodology. So,
Hmm.
and they call it Looking Glass. And
Yeah.
so they were having these viewers coming out of training, and Glenn is very, very uh, adamant about developing the viewer and carrying it on. A lot of times we have people that train people in their remote
Hmm.
viewing, and then they're released to the world. And
Right.
whether you practice or do something with it, it's all up on you. And a lot of times people will just kind of fade off and do their own thing, or they meet up with other people. But what Glenn really wanted to do was to provide a format and a forum for people to continue to develop as viewers, where they could get
Yeah.
together, do projects together, learn together, grow. And
That
so
makes all the
he's like,
difference, doesn't it? Like, not
yeah,
to cut you off, but like having a community that you can connect with who are all going through the same thing. You can share in the successes and the failures and
yep,
just learn from each other. That's
it's
awesome.
it's priceless. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he started the Looking Glass working group, and he asked me if I could come in and help him
Hmm.
mentor the new students. And I was like, heck yeah, man, I love this stuff. And
Hmm.
so Dick, Glenn, and myself were kind of the mentors where we would come in. And honestly, I know he asked me to come and be a mentor, but I was just, I was there to learn from Glenn and Dick. Like these guys are
Right.
just these
They're
Goliaths in the
they're on a
community. It's
different
like,
level. Yeah.
really, you want me to be a mentor? I feel like I could learn. So
Yeah.
I was just honored to be asked to do that. So I would pick practice targets and
Hmm.
I would give feedback to these students.
Right.
With like I call them, we're all students, right? I even consider
Yep.
myself still a student. I'm still
Same.
learning.
Yep.
And every week, we would have a new target, we would give feedback and do the analysis and all that. So I got really trained up in doing, picking a target and then getting sessions, putting it all together, giving the viewers, like showing them, look, these artifacts were all collected in your session. They relate to the target. Because a lot of
Yeah.
times we, as viewers, when we might draw a triangle and think that it's a pyramid or something like that,
Hmm.
and then we find out that the target was um, the Washington Monument. We're like, oh,
Right.
it wasn't a pyramid. I was off. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Look at the top of the Washington
Yeah.
Monument.
Your
It's an
analysis was
obelisk
off, but
and it's got a
right.
pyramid, right?
Right.
So when
Yeah.
you show people the artifacts that they collected that are relevant to the target, they're like, oh, oh, I see it now, and it helps it click for him. So
Yeah.
when I was doing that for, gosh, we've been doing it for almost 3 years now, I want to say. Um, that's where Dick, I guess he saw the analysis I was doing, and he said, "Hey, can you come in and help us with the future forecasting group?" And I was like, "Dick, I would be honored."
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that kicked off.
And you did a world events with us, right? That's when the first time you came on was a world event session, I think, right?
Yeah, July of this past summer, so July 23.
Yeah, and that was neat. That was a neat addition, to see everything compiled, all that data compiled in there, looking at, because we talk about it, we go through it, but to have that formal document there, really showing all the corroboration between everybody, it was just a really nice touch to it. So that's awesome. That's a cool journey as you go through that. And for those of you that are just tuning in, check out the previous podcast where Sean talked about his background as to how he kind of came through his spiritual awakening. That's a fun conversation we had about spirits and all sorts of energy and just a really neat conversation we had. So check that out. Um, so now you're here, future forecasting group. First impressions in being behind the camera now. What's your thoughts there? How's it going?
Well, I am still just kind of in awe, like,
Hmm.
how did I get here?
Yeah.
And I'm, I'm honored and humbled by this whole thing. And what I'm really here to do is to try to help this team succeed in producing, you know, information that's going to help the subscribers, bring
Yeah.
value, because I mean, the viewers are just phenomenal. These are some of the best viewers that we've got.
Yeah.
And, the information that they're producing, I think is going to help us to kind of peek around the corner of time and read the
Hmm.
tea leaves of, okay, what's coming down the pipe.
Right.
So, I just want to try to help produce some analysis that's going to show, because I think where you have really strong corroboration, um, that's where there's a lot of emphasis, or there's a really strong signal there,
Right.
something coming from the future that's important, something to focus on.
Right.
So,
So speaking of which, looking into the future, what are your thoughts on that in terms of benefits, pitfalls, dangers? I mean, how do you feel about that? Have you had any personal? I mean, I know you've had personal experiences as you're getting these intuitive things, back when you were starting to open up. But what's your overall experience and thoughts on doing that?
it's a tough one.
Mhm.
First of all, I don't believe the future is set in stone. I do believe
Mhm.
that we have free will. And just because our current course and trajectory is showing a probable timeline at this moment, like, hey, this is where you're headed right now. I fully believe that, not just as individuals, but as a collective, humanity can steer the course of that. Like, we can self-correct. And so if we're getting, if we're looking ahead and we see a warning sign on the horizon,
Mhm.
I think it's well within our power to turn the rudder and take a different course.
Yeah.
So, if we're picking up some data of a potential future, I don't think it does not mean that's going to happen. I think what it means is that that could happen, and if you
Mhm.
want it to happen, do things to steer towards it. If you don't want it to happen, do things to steer away from it. If that makes sense.
It does. How do you think you can steer away? Like we've got this anomaly that we're dealing with right now.
So, yeah,
How would you steer away from that?
this is
That's a
just
big
my two
question. So
cents.
just
Yeah.
yeah, I mean
No.
that's a big ask, but we're just having a conversation. Just curious your thoughts on it.
So philosophically, this is my personal perspective, my opinion. I think I made a mention of this when we were doing our after conversation of the
Hmm.
analysis, and I said, if you are a person that believes in prayer or
Hmm.
any sort of manifestation technique or magic, whatever it is you
Hmm.
believe in, I think as individuals, there is strength in numbers.
Hmm.
I think collectively, we do influence the future by putting positive intentions and positive
Hmm.
actions out there. Um, I'm not just saying that it's not just a rhetorical thing to say, because people will say, like, oh, I'll pray for you. And then they just, but it's something nice to
Right.
say. I think
Right.
if you actually do it, I want to say that they did an experiment with transcendental meditation
The
back
Maharishi
in,
effect.
yeah, and I think they
Yeah.
used like 6,000 meditators in out in Washington, D.C., if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken, and the crime rates went down.
It
So,
was a study. They actually looked back.
mhm,
So the way the experiment went is they looked at cities throughout the US that had a population of 1% or greater trained in transcendental meditation. And what they found was that crime rates were significantly lower. And then they found that in cities where over the amount of years that they looked at this data, where once the population reached 1% of people who were trained in transcendental meditation, then the crime rates started to go down. So they saw a strong correlation between the number of meditators and the way crime rates were impacted by it, which is just fascinating.
it is fascinating, and I believe in that. In fact, I've seen and, I've had anecdotal
Hmm.
experiences in my life that seem to show that. So I fully believe that if we
Yeah.
it's easy to get caught up in the drama, and the fear and the worry, like,
Hmm.
oh crap, what's is this going to happen? Like, we don't know, but
Right.
I think that where we do have power and control is how we react to it and what
Yeah.
we do today, right now. And I think that bringing that something of that into your daily practice can make a difference.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
I agree. I just put out a podcast talking about the same exact thing in how our intention and our focus, and then you look at some of the I think the known science behind things. Like I love the Heart Math Institute and the research that they have. If you're familiar with them, with the electromagnetic heart,
Yeah.
and how basically your emotions are energetically contagious, that you're constantly communicating with your environment and the people around you. And when you step back and you look at a political election, or you look at like a mob mentality and everybody's angry, you can see how you can understand now how that mob mentality is so dangerous, how it spreads if you're not grounded and you're not understanding, like, is this me or is this the crowd that's influencing how I'm feeling and I'm amplifying that signal?
Yeah, that it's funny you say that because I remember when I was first learning about empathic
Hmm.
like natures of people and all that. And I thought, well, that's interesting, but I don't think I'm empathic.
Hmm.
And I remember that I was driving to work one day and I'm right by where I live in Dayton, Ohio. We have the Air Force Museum here.
Hmm.
And they were having some sort of an event where these like World War II planes were flying over and landing at the museum. It was some event back in like, I want to say it was 2012 or 13. And so this event was going on now. I'm not a plane buff. I'm not a World War
Right.
II buff. But this was an event that I was just like, there was all these people pulling their cars off to the side of the road. They were all lined around the fence and looking at it and, taking pictures. And I was just like, I felt compelled to pull over and take a look, even though that's not really my thing.
Right.
And so I did. I pulled over and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I got the time. So I got out and I walked up to the fence and I felt this like exhilaration and excitement.
Yeah.
And I had this realization in the moment. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, this isn't mine. Like, I don't
Yeah.
feel this way, but I'm feeling what these people are feeling. And I was just like, oh my God, I am empathic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I started to pay attention, like when like my boss would come in and he was pissed off about something that I felt irritable. I'm like, wait a minute,
Hmm.
I'm not pissed. That's- I was like, oh my God, all this time throughout my life, I would feel something that I
Hmm.
was picking up and I would just own it, like, oh, this is me. And I would
Right.
just
You don't
assume
know.
that
You don't
was how I
recognize that it's someone else's emotions until you start
right.
really paying attention to it. You don't understand it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when we get caught up in the mentality of like the herd, right?
Hmm.
It takes a conscious effort to like take a step back and say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
is this me or is this them? And if it's
Yeah.
not me, then correct it. Like just kind of, okay, that's not
Hmm.
me. Center yourself and like, all right, where am I at in this? Like, what do I feel about this? And it helps
Right.
you to kind of not get caught up in, like I said, that herd mentality.
Hmm. And I think that's huge given the challenges that we're facing. We haven't mastered that collectively as a species yet. And I always wonder, imagine if we did, because
Yeah.
we have all the negative fear-based feeds that come in, and we can talk conspiracy all day long about it. Is that intentional, designed to keep us in that state, that frequency? But imagine what we could accomplish if we were all able to focus that positive, and use that for manifesting and kind of shaping our reality and our future, combined with the ability to use remote viewing and to get glimpses of a potential future, and kind of steer us as we go through. I wonder what that would bring for us.
What a world it would be.
Yes, indeed it would be. But then would that take away from these learning experiences we talked about previously when we go through those hardships, right?
Well, I still think there's plenty of learning to go around. Hell,
Agreed.
despite all these cool insights and techniques and things that I've learned, I still get hit upside the head by cosmic 2x4s with new lessons all the time.
Oh my
You
gosh.
just got to
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah. All the time. And, and I don't really have that level of, I'll say arrogance anymore, but when I was like, oh, I figured it out. And then it's like, oh yeah, check this out. It's like, okay, I know nothing. Here we go again. Time to learn, time to start school again.
Exactly.
So as an empath, what would you say is, your greatest strategy in just grounding yourself if you're taking on too much and just feeling drained? How do you deal with that?
Oh man, so this is kind of what I was talking about, where it's like, yeah, I've learned a lot, and I feel like it's helped me in a lot of situations, but I still fall prey to getting sucked into
Yeah.
the heat of the moment in certain circumstances, right? So, um, anybody who's raising teenagers, like my
Mm-hmm.
13-year-old, like she's going through the
Yep.
growing experience, right? And so emotions can run high sometimes and frustrations get there. And I'll find myself like getting frustrated. And it's like, no, Sean, like if you respond out of frustration,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to help the situation. So
Right.
I've been doing better lately about like being calm and like, okay, we need to like break this short circuit of drama and just kind of like be real with each other. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what's really bothering you? Like, how can we, because like my daughter will get stuck in like, get really negative about stuff. And I'll be like, and if you call her negativity to her attention, it just makes her more like, oh, I'll show
Right.
you. And
Right.
it's like, all right, that strategy's not working. So instead it's like, okay, give her a hug and
Mm-hmm.
say, all right, what can we do to change this? And just be present, right? And that's working a lot better. But it
Yeah.
it took, I would say it took me too long to learn that.
Yeah.
So yeah, being empathic, you still stumble a lot, but
It's
constantly
hard
learning.
because especially when you're dealing with heavy, big, complex emotions.
Yeah.
But I learned it, as a police officer, I've learned, and now being in education for the last 15 years, working with children, emotional needs children's. I mean, there's some intense feelings that come through. And if you can keep yourself calm and validate them and then just move through it, you find that the mood tends to change, the energy tends to change. You're not taking it on, where if you start taking it on, now you're amplifying it. You're going back and forth and things just go up. If you can
Yeah.
maintain that level. And there's some, there's some kids, they know how to push the button and it goes up, but it's neat to be able to stay grounded and to be aware of that process as you're going through it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head because when you're empathic and you embody the emotion that's being sent to
Mhm.
you and you reflect it back to them amplified, it feeds on each other, like it just
Right.
spirals, right?
It
And
does.
so it takes a lot of will and determination and like awareness to
Hmm.
recognize in the moment, like, okay, wait a minute, I need to short circuit this
Yep.
scenario. And instead of like taking that, like it's really easy. Like, what do they say? Like being kind to somebody that's being kind is really easy, but being kind to
Right.
somebody that's being nasty and mean is like one of the most difficult things in the world. But when
Yeah.
you think about it, that person that's being nasty is feeling that way for a reason, and
Right.
reflecting it back to them isn't going to change their situation. But
Right.
if you've ever been in a bad mood and somebody smiled and like completely just disrupted that with like something kind, like hasn't that helped you?
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is as much as possible, like not reflect that negativity back to them and change their day, right?
Yeah, it goes a long way when someone's hitting you with negativity and you give them genuine kindness back.
Yeah,
Really
but it's hard.
sincere. It can be. Yeah, it really, I mean, I remember, I used to do that as a police officer. People would be screaming at me. And I would just give them that kindness and like, no, I'm really just here to help you, and here's how we can help with this situation. And I rarely, unless I absolutely had to, I hated writing traffic tickets when I would pull people over. A lot of times they're having a bad day, they're rushing to get to work, and it's like, all right, be safe. Here's a warning. Have a nice day. And it made all the difference in people's moods when you just treated them with kindness. It really goes a long way.
Yeah, good on you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like I said, it's been a journey, going through it. But and being empathic has its challenges, but it also has, I think, its rewards once you start to understand how it works. So we've kind of run the gamut tonight, talking about all these different spiritual experiences and remote viewing and everything. Do you have one experience, and maybe we've already covered it, that just stands out for you as like, wow, this was just really a profound experience here with this intuitive or psychic stuff?
Yeah. Um, so I'm one of those people that believes that so remote viewing has such an amazingly powerful tool. And
Right.
the things that Future Forecasting Group is doing with taking, all these really, really awesome viewers and putting them together and
Hmm.
putting out products that can help people with answering questions about mysteries,
Right.
predicting the future trends of cryptocurrencies, and you know I'm not sure if they're looking at maybe getting into commodities and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
one tool that I think, or one area that I think remote viewing can be applied more is in problem solving.
Hmm.
And um, and I'll give an example of a really powerful. It's simple, but it's a powerful example about how we used remote viewing to help solve a really kind of a hard problem and save myself some coin in the process. So
Hmm.
um, I told you about how during lockdown I taught my girls remote viewing, and um, so I'm a Jeep guy. I
Hmm.
used to work at
Oh,
Chrysler.
me too.
I was a Jeep engineer.
Hmm.
Um, I've got two Jeeps, and we take
Yeah.
them and go off-roading out in Moab, Utah, and have a lot of fun. Well, I put a lift on this Jeep and bigger tires, and after I did that, I got this thing they call death wobble. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with death wobble, it's something that solid front axle vehicles are really susceptible to. And it's
Hmm.
when you get a little bit of play in the suspension. Um, and what happens is you hit like some sort of a road input, like a bump in the road.
Hmm.
And the frequency that goes through your steering system with that play in there, it can get into a resonance frequency. So your
Right.
tires start to excite, and it's kind of like what we were talking about it with empathic people
Right.
feeding off the
It
energy.
amplifies it.
Like, yeah, the amplified frequency makes like the steering wheel shakes, the car shakes, it
Right.
feels like you're gonna die. And the only way to stop it is to like slow down and get out of that
Hmm.
situation. So death wobble is very, very difficult to diagnose because it can be in any number of different components. And when it's the vehicle is up on the rack, it's very difficult to see like where your tolerances are that like might be causing it. And sometimes it can be more than one component, which makes it really difficult. So
Right.
oftentimes what shops do is they'll just start replacing parts one at a time until it's fixed. And replacing parts is very, very expensive. So I had death wobble in my Jeep. Um, I knew that it could have been any number of components, but it's a finite list. So it could
Right.
be the wheels and tires, it could be the tie rods, it could be the track bar, it could be the bushings, it could be the shocks. Um, so it could be the ball joints. So all these different things. And I was like, okay, um, let's see if remote viewing can figure out what the problem is. So my daughters were 7 and 10 at the time.
Hmm.
They were blind.
Yeah.
I'd been giving them practice targets and they were producing sessions. And so I told them, I was like, look, I just want some visual ideograms. And I gave them the coordinates. And the question that I had behind that tasking was, what component is causing the death wobble in my Jeep?
Hmm.
And the sketches that they gave me back strongly matched the ball joints and the castle nuts that go with the ball joints.
Yeah.
And so I took the Jeep to the mechanic that my family's been using for over a decade.
Mhm.
In fact, my parents have been going there for 2 decades. It's a shop where they've always done us right. If you come
Right.
in and you say, "Hey, I want this," they'll be like, "No, you don't need that. We'll save you money." So it
That's
wasn't a
great.
place that would have scammed us or anything like that.
Hmm.
So I brought it in. I said, "I got death wobble in my Jeep. I want to replace the ball joints. Here's the parts that I want to use." And they took it in. They looked at it. They're like, "Well, Mr. Mahoney, we think your ball joints might be going, but they're still pretty good. Your steering dampener, on the other hand, that looks like it's original, and we would say replace that before you do this." And I was like, "Nope, I want to do the ball joints, and if that doesn't fix it, then we'll do that." And they're like, "Your money." So
Right.
they took it in, they replaced the ball joints. I got the Jeep back. It was fixed. So
Wow.
first shot, one and done. And it just
Yeah.
from a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old drawing, 3 pages each of sketches. And
Yeah.
so what can we accomplish in this world? Because we have no shortage of problems,
Yep.
complex and simple. If we can use remote viewing to help solve problems, would we be in the situation we are in today? I don't know.
I think that's fascinating. And yeah, I think we're just, even though it's been going on for so long now, we're just scratching the surface with what we can do with it. And I never thought of it in that capacity. Like that's a great way to look into a problem. I'm going to start trying to see if how I can use that. I mean, I know I used it once. Simple thing. My kid lost her pet monkey, not her toy monkey that she takes
Mhm.
everywhere. And I was like, all right, real quick, I just close my eyes and sketch whatever I can. And I just drew this gray circular shape, and I was like, I don't know what the heck that is. So I go up and I'm looking in her bedroom, and on her bed she's got this gray stuffed shark, and it has a zipper mouth. And I unzipped it, and in there is the stuffed monkey. I was like, oh, okay, that is what I drew right there. This is when I was first learning remote viewing. So it's neat in all these different situations, these different applications, in ways that you can use it. And obviously,
Yeah.
it sounds like it saved you a lot of money in that case.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because when you
Yeah.
start replacing suspension components, man, that gets pricey.
Yeah,
So
it sure does. Wow. Well, that's awesome, Sean. And I know we've talked quite a bit this evening about a variety of different things. Any final thoughts here? Whether it's remote viewing, whether it's future forecasting, any other thing you want to cover tonight?
yeah, just I'm really excited to be a part of the team now, and you know, I cannot wait to see some of the Woo targets
Yeah,
because I love that type of stuff. So I'm
yeah,
really looking forward to getting some more analysis and seeing what type of sessions the team produces, and just yeah, and getting to engage with subscribers through the new website because
yeah.
yeah, that's just such a cool format. The way that they've gone with the new way of doing things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's such a great honor and privilege to work with the team, and just what a great, and I'd say even just watching the viewers, like if you're watching this podcast right now, and you're interested in learning remote viewing, I mean, there's a wealth of information I think that came through in this conversation, just hearing other people's experiences. I've learned so much from just watching Daz, Dick, Nyiam, Edward, watching their methods and watching how they do it as I'm going through it, as a trainee. You're in a session, you're like, oh, Edward did this technique, or Daz did this, or here's how he explains something. It has really helped me to develop. It's given me the confidence. So I'd say just watching what they do, if you're interested in learning remote viewing, there's just such a great amount of knowledge that comes through with that.
Yeah, in fact, I'm still fascinated with Edward's ability to prompt himself in a session to dig
Yeah.
deeper, where he takes these
Hmm.
movement brackets and he asks questions, and
Yeah.
then he asks another question. When I'm in a session now, I know that I can do that, and I used to do it in CRV,
Yeah.
but you're in this different state, and it's very difficult. Like I think that's why they used monitors when they had the
Right.
military unit because the monitor is able to have that awareness and presence to be like, okay, what's the next
Right.
question? Because you're just when you're in the viewing state, you're kind of out in a
Hmm.
different you're in a different place, right? Then
Yeah.
and Edward just seems to take that mentality with him where he's able to like engage and dig deeper. And I just still think it's cool the way he unravels the session.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's
it's neat
fascinating.
to watch that process, as I'm experimenting with kind of how I'm developing, there's times I'll hear his voice in my head as I'm going through it, and I like just his rhythm, his tone. And I do the same thing with like Dick and Daz too. Like I just hear their process sometimes as I'm going through it. So it's neat. It's neat, working with them and just watching them, and then using that, what they're doing as you grow and develop. So
Yeah, for
really great
sure.
stuff. Well, Sean, as I said previously, I'm really excited to see you in the role that you're in at the helm with the team. I'm looking forward to what you're going to bring, especially the analysis that you bring to the community. So, best of luck to you. Obviously, you and I will be, in ongoing communication as we go through this journey together. But I think it's a great fit. I'm excited to see what else you're going to bring to us.
Thank you, Dennis. And I'm really looking forward to working more with you as well.
All right. Well, it's going to be a great journey. To those of you watching, those of you interested in knowing more, futureforecastinggroup.com, and you can see all of our incredible projects that we have there. Every so often, they run a 7-day free trial as well. I'm not sure when the next one is going. There might even be one right now, so check it out. But so many great targets navigating, the crypto financial markets, the, political stuff, world events stuff. Really, what's the big picture? Where's the world going? How do we navigate it? And of course, the fun ones, the mystery targets, the woo-woo targets, exploring all those things out there. So check us out, futureforecastinggroup.com. Thank you to Sean for being my guest this evening, and thank you to the Future Forecasting Group and to all of you. I'm Dennis Nappi II. Thanks for
Thank you.
watching.